I have to say that the best part of being part of this whole card making community is the people that you meet, even if it's not in real life. Today, I'm collaborating again with one of my online crafty friends, Sasha Reade. Just like last time, we each chose a technique from the other's channel and tried it out. I chose this video that Sasha did recently about using watercolor powders with plastic wrap. Watercolor powders are one of the things that I don't pull out enough, but when I do, it's so fun to make a ton of backgrounds. There's absolutely no control, but I always get some fun surprises. Let's start here. These are my watercolor powders. You can use whatever watercolor powders you've got or even ink smooshing to get a similar look to what I'm doing. These ones are all from Lindy's and they used to come in these tubes of little tubs, but they were a little difficult to work with if I'm honest. More recently, they've been selling the newer ones in these little shaker jars, and even better, I found a shop with some empty bottles so I could transfer the powders from my tubs into them, and that's exactly what I did. I used my heat gun to loosen the sticker from the tub lid, and I put it on the side of the shaker jar. As you can see, right now I'm keeping them in acrylic drawers, and I numbered the top of them, and those numbers correspond with my swatch chart here. I also have them all listed in my Airtable, along with the set they came from, just to help me keep track in case I ever need to know that. Okay, so I started by choosing a color. This one really fascinated me, and it's called Roll in the Hay. Oh my goodness, that's hilarious. It's from the Vincent van Gogh inspired set that's pretty new. Next, I chose number 38, which is Impressionist ink from the Monet inspired set. And then, maybe a teal or bluey green one? This one. It's my favorite Looney Toony teal from the Great White North set. This one has sparkle and was one of the first magical sets that I bought. Next, let's talk about paper. I like to use Nina Index for my powders and also for any gel plate techniques. It's thin and it gets soaked through, but it allows a lot of movement of the pigment. And when it dries, yes, it's warped, but it's light enough that it's easy to flatten it out. I'm using a flat acrylic drawer here just to kind of contain my mess. It's easy to clean between color changes too. This time I'm starting with dry paper and sprinkling the powders down before adding the water. But of course you can go in the opposite order and put the water down first. I'll try that a little later on. I don't think it really makes much difference. I've sprinkled bits of each color on my paper and you can see that you don't need much. These powders are super pigmented. The next thing is of course the water. I use this continuous spray bottle which puts out a lot of water very quickly. I like how it gets the colors moving in a really dramatic way, but again, use what you have and a regular spritzer bottle will work just fine. See how these colors just explode? That hay was a little weak for me, so I grabbed it and added a bit more, along with a bit more water to just kind of dissolve the particles of pigment. That's better. Now for the plastic wrap. You want a piece that's significantly bigger than your panel so you can crumple it up over top of the wet page. And now comes the hardest part. You have to wait for it to dry. Really, overnight since I was working in the evening. So I figured I would just do some more panels. I set this one aside, cleaned out my little drawer, and got another half sheet of index cardstock. This time I chose another favorite color, Banff Blue, again from the Great White North set, and then Alien Goo Green and Martian Magenta from the Outer Space set. This time I put some water down first, then I started with the green. I added some of the magenta and finally the blue, which pretty much took over. This one's going to be really bold. Then I got out some gold watercolor and splattered that over top. It moved as well in all that water, rather than settling down in drops like it would if the panel was dry. I had some bubble wrap from a recent package nearby, so I thought I'd give that a try rather than just the plastic wrap again. Then I set that one aside to dry as well. Next, I chose some bright primaries. Teeny Weeny Bikini from the Summer Break collection, Past the Jam Jane from the Tea and Crumpet set, and Portrait Blazer from Vinnie's View. I tried spritzing some water in the drawer first this time to see if it would hold the paper down rather than it curling up. I'm not sure it made much of a difference, but it was worth a try. I put the colors down in kind of stripes with a little bit of the next color on each end, hoping for some rainbow blending. These are really pretty and bright, and oops, I need a bit more of the pink. This time I was just looking around my craft room for some other ideas for texture, and I used one of my trusty red microfiber towels. I wasn't sure if it was going to give much texture at all, so I snuck a peek and I could see some there, so I closed it back up and set that one aside to dry. Now, as I was cleaning up, it was pretty easy with my swatch chart to match up the numbers with the colors, but I realized what was missing from my system was a matching number on the jars, so I wasn't having to think too hard. Number 4, I chose Water Lilies Lavender from Monet All Day and Have a Scone Heather from Tea and Crumpets. Do you say scone or scone? I make amazing cheese scones, and I have always said scones, but I know lots of people say scones. I put the paper down, and this time I put down a snowflake mask from a Colorful Life Designs, no pixie spray, and then I started sprinkling the powders over top. This is where I'm still struggling with my technique. I feel like I need a lot of water to get the pigment moving, but on the other hand, I know the more water I put down, the less likely I'm going to see much of that snowflake when I'm done. Know what I mean? This time for texture, I used a paper towel. There is a bumpy pattern on this that will hopefully transfer to my panel. Okay, last one, but it's a 2-for-1. This time I put a stencil down first. This one had pixie spray on the back. Oh gosh, did I tell you the colors? I can't read those tiny numbers. I'll put them on the screen when I do my final edit. It looks like Banff Blue, Goo Green, and maybe Pemberley Pride Purple. This time I'm using a regular spritzing bottle, hoping not to end up with all that water getting under the stencil somehow. But again, I needed enough to dissolve the pigment. If you've got tips on this technique, please let me know. I've seen some people get beautifully clean results with stencils and powders, but I haven't managed it yet. Oops, spoiler alert. This time, instead of adding something more than the stencil to create texture, I put down a second panel of index paper to absorb the excess water and pigment. I pressed it in and pushed my waters over it until the water started seeping through, and then I pulled it off. This is almost like what would happen if you were using a gel plate with a stencil and the powders. And then I set these last two aside to dry, and I got on with adding the numbers to the labels on the jars so I can easily match them up when I'm working. I guess I could have made my little dots on the lids in the same colors, but if I was using more than one blue, I might still have trouble figuring out which one was which. I don't know. Let me know if you have a better idea you want to share for keeping track of these. My system feels slightly clunky to me. Okay, after a good night's sleep, here's the results and the cards I made. Number 1, the roll in the hay. These are not my normal colors, but I really love this. You can see the texture from that plastic wrap. I created a thank you card using some of the goodies from Crafty Meraki's latest release. The fern lattice cover plate has a pretty stitched pattern with some leaf-shaped holes. I didn't have enough of the colored panel scrap left for a whole die cut, so I cut as much as I could, and then I trimmed it into strips and added it to a white die cut to create my background. The succulent comes from another new set that has a bunch of different plants and a detailed layering guide to make it easy to get it all lined up correctly. Each plant has all its pieces in one die, so you're not trying to figure out which piece goes with which, and that makes life easy. I finished this one with a Mama Elephant Thanks die cut sentiment cut from Inca Gold and some Enchanted Forest gems. Next, the bubble wrap panel. These colors are amazing, but the bubble wrap pattern only seems to appear in the shimmer, and I'm not sure if that's from the gold watercolor or the actual shimmer in the powders. I made another thank you card with another new cover plate die from Crafty Meraki. This one's called Marrakesh Mosaic. For the little flower edition, I used one little tiny die from this wreath set. Again, each flower has all its pieces in one die, so it's easy to remember how to put them together. I put the packaging showing the different flowers in my pocket for easy reference. I used a layered thanks word die cut sentiment from LDRS for this one, and what makes this card special is the use of iridescent cardstock behind the cover plate die cut, as well as for the shadow of the thanks. It's hard to get a photo without a reflection of me in it, but you can see how pretty this is. I didn't even feel the need to add any gems or embellishments. For this really bright panel, believe it or not, you can see the subtle texture of the microfiber towel in it, and that surprised me. Now, I need to divert here a minute and show you a mini lines thing. Altenew recently released this PixelGrid die, and my hand automatically reached for Add to Cart. But then I remembered I have an old grid cover plate also from Altenew, and I decided to try and get a similar look. I cut it from a white panel and randomly knocked out some of the little squares, leaving the ones that wanted to stay in right where they were. I added a Celebrate die from a larger set from scrapbook.com and 3 little clear gems underneath, using the grid to guide my placement. What do you think? I like it. Have you ever talked yourself out of a purchase by substituting something you already have? It's a great feeling of accomplishment, and I'm feeling very proud of myself. Next is my snowflake panel. Where's the snowflake, you ask? I agree. I felt like it was still visible enough that I needed to finish the card with a snowflake. So I grabbed my biggest snowflake die, the Lydia snowflake from Picket Studios, and I added it to a circle cut from the panel, backed onto a dark purple panel. I filled in the center with purple and clear gems to give an almost shaker look, but they are glued down and they don't move. With this big snowflake filling the card, I didn't want to try and figure out where to put a sentiment. But the nice thing about snowflake cards is we know they're for Christmas. I can put the sentiment on the inside. Now here's the print I pulled off the stencil. I like that it has lots of white space still. This time, instead of cutting into it with a cover plate die, I used the signature polka dot cover plate from a Jillian Vance design and I embossed it. This gives some fun texture and pattern. I also embossed the shadow portion of my die cut sentiment. For my embellishments, I used some navy confetti sequins along with some lime green gems to give a different look and to help the gems stand out rather than blending into the background. And here's my failure. I wanted a clean white stenciled pattern on this one, but obviously the pixie spray was overcome by the water. I'll keep working on this because I do like the look. And even this failure has some pretty interesting features. The colors are beautiful, there's a ton of texture from the stencil, even if the pattern's a lot more subtle than I had intended. I cut this one down with the craft around cover plate from Crafty Meraki, and I backed it on black for some drama. This gives it a really masculine feel. I added a Concord and Ninth die cut birthday sentiment and some emerald gems, and you can see how these ones almost disappear on the background, which is okay. They'll still give a flash when they're caught in the light, but it's a lot less noticeable than the ones on the sequins in the previous card. Which one's your favorite? I think my number one is the grid, but I was surprised by how much I love that succulent card. I think the variations in the paper really added so much interest to it. And now it's time to head to Sasha's channel to see how she was inspired by one of my videos. The link is right here, so I'll meet you over there. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.